What is up, boys and girls? It's Seb here with Modify Up. You guys asked for it, so here it is. In this video, I'm going to show you how to convert your Thrustmaster F1 steering wheel to USB using an Arduino Pro Micro and the Amstudio button box sketch. We're going to delete the two useless joysticks and add two new encoders. And we're going to put a real quick release system on the back so you can use it with your OSW steering wheel base. Let's check it out. So, you've just upgraded your setup to direct drive, but want to keep your old trusty Thrustmaster Ferrari F1 wheel? I hear you. It's got really good ergonomics and one of the only entry-level F1 wheels with thumb encoders, so why wouldn't you save it? The problem is that, unlike every other single Thrustmaster wheel, there's no off-the-shelf adapter to convert the electronics to USB. But if you're not afraid of tackling a bit of soldering yourself, we can change that by repurposing the Amstudio button box Arduino sketch. To start off, you'll need to head over to Amstudio Projects and purchase the 32 function button box guide, which contains a comprehensive wiring guide and the most important component, the Arduino sketch. Don't be a tight ass, don't look for the free version because it just won't work. Just pay the man and be done with it. Now, let's take a look at the hardware we'll be using to get this wheel working independently via USB. We need an Arduino Pro Micro, two rotary encoders with push button function, two knobs for the encoders, a USB mini panel mount cable, a USB to USB mini cable, some female PCB jumper wires, extra wire and solder, 3mm alloy plate, 20 3/8" washers, some 8G by 20 screws, and a quick release of your choice. First off, let me say those joysticks on the wheel are absolutely useless for anything other than navigating menus, so we won't be wiring them in. Instead, you can replace them with two extra encoders, or you can leave them in place and mount the encoders elsewhere. I've chosen to leave them in place as I plan to use them for navigating screens once I wire up a screen to this wheel later on down the track. So I'll be mounting the encoders next to the joysticks. Feel free to mount them wherever you want. You can even make those fake dials on the wheel functional with these encoders. Pulling the wheel apart is very simple with two screws coming in from the front face and 12 more on the back. Once these are out, you can separate the two halves by unplugging the three connections on the main board for the shift paddles and the main PS2 plug. Now we can take a good look at the internal workings of the wheel. This is the last time it's going to look that neat in there because we'll be removing this board and replacing it with wiring, so it's going to become a little more crowded in there. Go ahead and unplug all the connections to the main board. So now I'm testing the smaller board for the toggle switches to see how the circuit is formed. Turns out the two-way toggles are bridged so that a two-way switch only puts out one signal, meaning it doesn't matter which way you toggle the switch, you'll only ever get one function out of its current configuration. This is a waste of three two-way switches, so we'll also remove this board to give it true two-way functionality. Now go ahead and remove the main board held in place by 4 screws, and don't forget to take out the spring behind the board. Let's go ahead and mount these two encoders. As I said earlier, feel free to mount these anywhere you want. This is a nice spot as the internal ribbing of the wheel lets the encoder mount hard up against it. Now we can remove the mini board that houses the three toggle switches. If you're reusing these switches, you can desolder them from the board using a solder sucker, or you can simply unscrew them from the wheel face and replace them with new two-way toggles. Once you have all your switches and encoders mounted to the wheel, we can go ahead and start prepping the Arduino Pro Micro controller. You can always solder your wires directly to the board, but I prefer to solder in the PCB pins and use jumper wires to connect to the board. This will save you soldering every single wire to the board again if for some reason you fry the board. Go ahead and solder all the pins to the board, making sure you don't create any bridges between the pins. Now here is the wiring diagram I created to match up the buttons to the Arduino sketch. Study it carefully, as matrix wiring that doesn't lay in a physical grid can become really confusing. The best method is to tackle one function or one pin at a time and mark off on the diagram exactly which functions you have wired as you go. Go ahead and cut the plugs off the original wires and follow the wiring diagram to complete each circuit. Try to use the least amount of wire possible, as the more wire in there will make it harder to make the two halves of the wheel back together. Once you're finished, you can hot glue the Arduino board to the inside of the wheel, making sure you leave enough room for the panel mount USB cable. For the panel mount USB cable, I'm mounting it up high on the wheel in the center and offset to the right, so it's hard up against the internal ribbing of the wheel. Simply drill 2 holes for the mounts and file out a rectangle hole big enough to fit the USB mini plug through. Here you can see all the connections to the Arduino are hot glued to stop them vibrating loose. And you can see the panel mount cable mounted to the back half of the wheel. With the wiring out of the way, we can turn to the mounting system and attach a proper quick release system to the back of the wheel. Remove the shifter paddle plate by removing the 4 screws. This is a perfect time to do a magnetic paddle conversion, but we'll leave that for another time. Pull the housing that holds the micro switches out, and then the shifter paddle, then we can move on to the mount itself. We need to cut the threaded section all the way flush with the main body of the mount. Here you can see I've cut it, but I left 1 centimeter of thread thinking this would be enough. Well, it's not, so cut it down completely flush, which we'll see later on in the clip. Go ahead and remove the PS2 plug, because we definitely don't need this anymore. Now we can make up the plate that will bolt to the back of the wheel with the purpose of holding the new quick release system. Simply cut out a rectangle plate from the 3mm alloy that's big enough to house your quick release system and place the plastic mount on top. Then mark out the 4 mounting holes with a center punch so we can drill them out. Next, we mark out the center of the plate so that we can make the pitch circle for the quick release. Depending on which quick release system you decide to use, you'll need to mark out either a 70mm circle or a 74mm circle. Most wheels will take a 70mm pitch circle diameter, so set up your verniers to 35mm and mark out your circle. Now we're going to find the center line of the plate so that we can line up our quick release. Mark out the center by measuring the middle point between the 2 mounting holes at the top and the 2 mounting holes at the bottom so you can line up the quick release. Then go ahead and mark out each hole using the quick release as a template. Now we're ready to drill the plate. I'm using a drill press here, but being 3mm and non-critical, you could easily do this with a hand drill in a vise. When you're finished, the plate will have 4 mounting holes for the wheel and 6 holes for the quick release. Go ahead and mount your quick release up to the plate and set it aside. Now we can put the whole wheel back together, being careful not to pinch any wires when putting the two halves together. Note here how I recut the plastic mount flush against the body. Put all of the screws back in except for the 4 main screws that go through the plastic mount. We're going to replace these with long screws that go up through the new plate that we just made. Place 5 3/8 washers stacked over each mounting hole. I made 4 crush tubes that go into the original screw holes, but this is overkill as there's enough strength in the housing to use just washers, even with an OSW direct drive wheelbase. These washers are there to space the plate far away enough from the wheel so as not to interfere with the shifter paddle throw. Then we can place the new quick release plate on and screw it down using the new longer screws. And just like that, my friends, your wheel is complete. For the software side, we need to download the Arduino IDE program so that we can load the sketch to the Pro Micro. Open up the instructions in the Amstudio button box guide for loading the sketch up to the Arduino. And then you can test the button's function, ensuring you have correctly wired each button. Alright, so once you've downloaded the Arduino program, you just need to go to Tools, set up your board, Arduino Micro, and then set up your COM port. Then we hit verify, make sure you've got your keypad and joystick libraries loaded, and then upload. Once it's finished, you can go to your game controllers, click on properties, and test all of the functions and make sure you haven't messed up any of your wiring. And that's it. Now all that's left is to map the buttons in game and you're ready to race. I recommend using a USB curly cable with this wheel, but any sufficiently long USB cable will be just fine. Alright guys, we are at Istanbul Park in Turkey. We're in the Ferrari SF70H. I'm using the small Midge OSW. I just want to show you all of the functions working on the wheel now. We got the KERS management. Let's set that to hot lap. We've got the recovery on the right encoder. We've got the brake bias on the new encoders. We have proper two-way functionality on these switches now. So let's just strap in and enjoy. Now coming up to the straight, we can really open up that KERS. So much detail with the OSW. Get a brake bias. KERS coming onto the straight, the T.R.C. Really use all the functions of this wheel now. The brake bias. That's it guys, I hope you enjoy. That is it guys, I hope this helps you with your sim racing adventures. If you like what you see today, make sure you hit that subscribe button so I can keep making videos for you guys to watch. Next week we'll be jumping back on Project Wonder and taking a look at a rock solid rear end for the Hachi. That's it guys, bye!